As the cryptocurrency world keeps growing, so too does the need for infrastructure and infrastructural support. After all, something as common as a cryptocurrency exchange has a ton of moving parts that operate behind the scenes. End users are provided with a rather simple service. However, the amount of technical infrastructure, including data feeds, cybersecurity, and more, is considerable. Therefore, as crypto keeps getting bigger, the importance of these backend features becomes all the more important. Recently, finance magnates sat down with Robert Materazzi, co-CEO of blockchain data provider firm Lukka, which turns blockchain data into easy-to-use information to support business operations. Robert spoke about supporting companies with various blockchain data-related needs, the changing regulatory landscape in the United States, and crypto's big move into the mainstream institutional scene. I'm Rachel McIntosh, and this is the Finance Magnates Blockchain Podcast. First of all, Robert, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show. Real pleasure to have you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Robert Materazzi. I'm the co-CEO at Lukka. I've been at Lukka for about 2 years. I was with PricewaterhouseCoopers for about 5 years before that, and then was in the military prior to that.
Oh, wow.
Um, Really, what we do at Lukka is help this new digital asset ecosystem with their middle and back office operations and all the data complexities.
So can you talk about a little bit about making the switch from having this background in military and working at PricewaterhouseCoopers into the crypto world?
Sure. Yeah, I guess there's a couple transitions there. I mean, first from the military just into corporate America. I mean, that was my goal, I guess, in life, right? That was the path that I wanted to take. I went into the military a bit unplanned after 9/11.
Okay. Wow.
Was a pilot there for 9 years, and then was connected to several Fortune 500 type companies through a recruiting firm, and ended up in PwC's financial services, banking and capital markets practice, where I started off in a lot of project management roles, and formed an expertise in the larger scale technology implementation, and a lot of risk governance, a lot of the compliance that the banks had to do post financial crisis, particularly as it relates to their technology, and the controls and managing risk around it. Did a lot of cybersecurity work as well.
Okay.
And then was not working actively in crypto or blockchain. I stayed. I read about it, right? But that was about the limit. I didn't actually work in it. And that's very, very different, right? The textbook knowledge compared to the hands-on knowledge is very, very different. And I was connected to it was Libra at the time. We've now changed our name to Lukka a little over a year ago. And so I was connected to Libra and met the team, and that caused me to do a ton of research, as you can imagine, because the one, like, I was very comfortable with technology, with the customers they were selling to, with the overall business plan, and I was very attracted to the data aspects and how complex it was in the industry, and then how Lukka was in a very mature way solving it, so with institutional standards. And they were forming their whole business model around that at the time. And so I made the leap. I came over and actually ended up in my first 18 months in probably 6 different roles. And then they asked me to fill the co-CEO role this past March. It's been great. Now we kind of say that, it's a multiple higher than dog years in the crypto industry. So
yeah, definitely. And sounds like you came to this company at a really interesting time in the cryptocurrency space and sort of in the world at large. As we know, March was, the crypto's Black Thursday happened in March, and since then everything has really changed so much. So I want to ask you a little bit more specifically about what Lukka does. So Lukka on the website, it sort of says we turn blockchain data into easy to use information to support business operations. So can you give me sort of a practical, concrete example of what that might look like?
So, it seems like just about every business in the world is trying to figure out what to do with blockchain. Everyone
Hmm.
agrees that it's great, but they don't really know why yet.
Yeah.
Um, and and then there's this whole industry that's evolved, that's had various reputations over the years, right? The actual cryptocurrency markets. And what's happened is, and it really started with the launch of the Ethereum blockchain, and then after that, a ton more assets started being created on blockchains.
Hmm.
And a lot of companies argue that, oh, there should only be one big blockchain, and we should figure out interoperability and all these different topics, which all sounds all great. But at the end of the day, we appreciate all the innovation that's taking place with the creation of all these new blockchains,
Hmm.
and all the new assets that it creates and all the new businesses that have formed around it, and the accessibility to these assets and the liquidity that it's created around the world. But when we do that and we add multiple blockchains with very different protocols and different rules, to put it simply, that relate to them, it makes the back office aspects of interacting with all that data more challenging, because it wasn't what the blockchain was originally designed to do.
Right.
And so when we have thousands of blockchains today, I know CoinMarketCap lists over 7,200 assets,
Hmm.
and it creates very new data challenges, and it's everything from valuing these assets at specific dates and times, at converting all the various formats to a consistent view so that we can create, what would traditionally be considered very simple reports.
Hmm.
And so we're the gap between all of that more complex data that's difficult to solve, and then the normal reporting requirements that businesses need.
I see. So say for example that I'm a business that works in supply chain. I'd like to use, I'd like to sort of develop a blockchain strategy for my business. How could Luca help me in that specifically?
Yeah, so that is, I would say that use of blockchain is not as mature as a lot of the crypto assets use. Just
Right.
to start,
Okay.
we kind of very generically call that enterprise blockchain use cases. So it's any of the non-assets. But there's, in supply chain is a very perfect use case, right? That I haven't heard anyone disagree that it adds a lot of value to the supply chain process. But at the end of the day, that all of the information that is being stored on the blockchain that's supporting whatever supply chain efficiencies for a business,
Hmm.
if it ever has to interact with any other transactions or data sets, or needs to be normalized, there's a layer of governance, whether it's audit controls, or it's sorting out the data to view across blockchains, that is the same regardless of whether we're looking at a supply chain blockchain or something that's representing assets. If there's a transaction that occurs, whether it's financial or not, then the data is difficult to manipulate.
Hmm.
And we built unique infrastructure that's designed just to handle blockchain data, or rather, not just blockchain data, but the data that's as complex as blockchain data. Um, and and so there would be applicability there, but we aren't currently supporting that. I'd still consider that in more the innovation or the development phase,
Right.
across
Right.
the.
Okay. So then can I ask you, sort of, are there trends as to which kind of companies or which industries in particular that Luca is working with the most?
Sure. So, the first companies to cater to these new markets, I mean, to all the demands that the world was really asking, and what they did is everyone wanted to be able to exchange these assets for one another. And so, just like people do in the securities markets or the FX markets, so all these crypto exchanges, like Coinbase and Kraken and so on across the world have formed. And so all of those businesses are customers of ours, or potential customers of ours. Many of the big name logos actually are customers, either of our software or data products. And usually what we're doing for them is helping them with their normal financial reporting,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's their corporate books for a fund, if it's sorting out the data so that they can strike NAV, or it's passing their first audit, or applying some tax strategy with an advisor, but they need someone to sort out the data so that they can be advised. All of those things apply. And then from there, really the exact same problems exist on any other businesses that have any type of crypto asset data.
Mm-hmm.
We do cater to, we have very large fund administration customer segments. That was one of our first. A lot of fund auditors, the exchanges, over-the-counter desks. We even have protocols themselves that will exchange, whatever asset they're maintaining for other currencies or for cash, just to pay their employees, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Mining businesses and operations. Really, so it touches anyone. It's kind of like asking, who are your customers? And to someone that runs a back office for a business, it doesn't really matter what their business is. If they're dealing in money and transactions, then there's a use.
Right,
It's
right.
really the same thing here. It's anyone who's actually taken the leap and is either, whether their core business is in cryptocurrencies like the big exchanges, or it's that they're just adding another payment method for their customers to sell their products. In either case, there's a use case for us. I will say that, the big difference over the last year
Mm-hmm.
are all of the regulator and government agency updates and announcements that have come out. And, of particular interest, like the OCC announcing that nationally chartered banks can custody digital assets. A ton of different guidance that's come out over the last 2 years from the IRS, including moving up to ask every tax filer if they've acquired any virtual currency. So a lot of that has caused a ton of momentum with the traditional financial institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're right on the cusp of kind of the traditional financial services world engaging digital assets much more seriously.
I see. I see. So I want to ask you about this thing that Lukka has just launched called the Lukka Library. Can you talk a little bit about what the function of that library is?
Sure. So we have a pool of authors who are thought leaders in the space, whether they are attorneys or CPAs or whatever their profession is, but they have a unique perspective and they've honed in on digital assets or crypto assets and one of the many issues that may exist around them. And so they write short form white papers and they contribute them towards the library with their brand or their firm's brand on it at their choice. We share 20% of the revenue with those contributing authors. And then we offer the subscription to access all of that content for a low cost to consumers, so to anyone that would like to buy it. So it's a thought leadership. It has about 100 papers that are in it today. We've just newly launched it, so it's a brand new product.
Yes.
And it's meant to just help with some education in the industry and give people some trusted sources of information.
Right, exactly. And on this headline for the statement that I saw about this library, it says that it was sort of launched in the absence of federal guidance. So that's something that's kind of been a hot topic of conversation over the last particularly 3 years, but sort of always in the cryptocurrency space within the United States, is this like perpetual lack of clarity when it comes to cryptocurrency guidance. Do you think that, the events of this year specifically have sort of lit a fire under regulators to start providing a little bit more clarity, a little bit more regulation for cryptocurrency? Or do you think that, things are sort of moving at the same pace that they always have?
No, there's absolutely a spike going on right now. And I don't mean in like the price or the volatility of the assets, even though that's a whole other topic, which is also, has a big spotlight on it right now. But whether it's the regulators that are kind of lighting that fire or that additional interest, or it's the other companies that are causing the regulators to be more interested, I'm not quite sure. But all of the above is true. I mean, it's the regulators, the big financial institutions, even what we call more the crypto enterprises that are doing things like filing for banking and depository licenses, like Kraken announced, a week or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things are causing a lot more visibility, and it's showing the world that these businesses are serious, that they're a lot larger than most people realized. There's a lot more volume going on around these assets around the world, and I think it's pretty safe to say that it's definitely not going away for those that might have thought that for a while. A lot of people have known that for a while, but the others are kind of coming to realize it now.
So do you think that this is the reason that, not only in this Lukka library, which is a great example of this, but sort of more and more we're seeing also industry bodies come together, different industry participants come together and sort of involve themselves in vocalizing about regulation and what has been happening and what needs to happen still.
Absolutely. I mean, we see ISO, for example, with RFPs on trying to create equivalents of ISIN. We see our partner, CPA.com, which is the for-profit subsidiary of the AICPA, is very actively involved. I mean, not just through our partnership, but they're thought leaders in the space. There's several working groups talking about various topics, whether it's tax or accounting or risk and controls. So there's absolutely, I mean, even, I'll give a lot of credit to the regulators, in agencies such as the IRS, honestly, I mean, the learning curve is steep, but the effort is clearly there. They are taking it very seriously, and they're very actively looking to make sure that they're accounting for cryptocurrencies or virtual currency. So.
Right. So, from your perspective, where do you think that things need to head at this point from a regulator standpoint?
I mean, it really just needs to continue on the path that it's on right now. I mean, the announcements that have come out this year alone are very impressive. I mean, and it's not really the content within them. I'd say like the content is still very preliminary, but just the fact that there's on a recurring basis a different regulator or agency that's announcing something related to cryptocurrency. I mean, it seems like almost every other week right now.
That's true.
That's the big sign for me. I mean, the actual regulation will mature once they understand all of the issues. And that's going to take some time to develop, and innovation's moving fast. So I'm sure once we do figure it out, it's all going to change, and we're going to have to figure it out again. But I think that's what the thing, though, so.
Yeah. So how do you see the role of this Lukka library sort of growing and changing as more and more regulations come into play in the United States?
We are actively talking to a lot of other reputable information sources across the industry, whether it's the pure crypto industry or traditional, and so that we can provide more insights to our customers and to the entire industry. Right. And so, you'll look to see a lot of those partners that we're looking to share content through there. We're already, you can see it's offered on CPA.com's website, for example. And we're collaborating with them on a lot of different contents to build it out even more. So I'd say, generally speaking, we're just getting started with it. It's a very new product. There's going to be a ton of updates and a ton of more information that we plan on adding to it, to continue to offer that information to everyone.
Okay, very exciting. So Robert, before we go, I want to ask you, are there any important announcements for Lukka that you'd like to share, or can you tell our listeners where they can find out more about Lukka?
Sure. So you can see Lukka at our website at lukka.tech, Lukka, .tech. We are working on a ton of really big things that I can't quite share yet, but I will say, look in the press for them in the very near future. We're very, very excited about our own business, about the ecosystem, and about, what all of our partners are working on. So I know that's vague, but you'll see.
Keeping it mysterious. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, Robert, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.